just make sure that whatever you do, it's what you enjoy. And I mean that also about the work conditions. And if it's not what you enjoy, I would recommend just to shift, especially if you are in any technical position like software development or programming, whatever. There's jobs out there that are much safer and so on. And maybe you enjoy that even more. But if you enjoy it, I think the only way is to find your way through it and not be 100% reliant on your next paycheck, which nowadays is just, I would say to some degree, too unsafe in a lot of studios for now.
Hi, and welcome to the TD Meetup. My name is Alexander Richter. I'm a technical director for visual effects, animation, and games, and I worked at companies like VFX and Framestore on Avatar: The Way of Water and Monsters at Work.
Today, we want to talk about the future of visual effects. And one of the reasons that we came to this topic was obviously the last few months, what happens with Technicolor and so on, obviously, but also this survey I did on LinkedIn where I had 208 votes. Question how do you feel the visual effects is doing, the visual effects industry? And like 75% was saying badly. So I wanted to take the moment a little bit to look at the situation, look at visual effects, look where we are now and why we are here. And especially, and I think that is the point that we want to make together with Alan today, is to look at what is the problem, what can we do as an industry, but also as individuals, also for ourselves, not just, we need to fix the industry or whatever. How can we react to be in this industry, to be successful as much as possible, and not always, take the back of all the problems that are in this at the end of the day. So that's the reason for today. And I joined today by Alan, who is co-founder and visual effects supervisor at Static VFX Studio and also VS member. And we recently talked about it, and I thought it was like a great opportunity to see it a little bit from a studio perspective, maybe, to see it from a mixture between supervisor and studio owner, and to see how he feels and sees that thing. It's great to have you with us, Alan.
Really, really nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and excited to see, what might come out of these type of conversation. I'm sure it's one of many, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and this time we will do it a little bit different than usual. So we will address certain topics, and I want you to add comments to it. So if you want to add something to a certain topic, just feel free to raise your hand. You can see the hand raised button, and then I will take you in. And the moment I have an opportunity, I will bring you in and you can give your comment, your questions, whatever. So we will do it more like we go through certain topics. And if you want to add to this topic or ask a question, just raise your hand so we can do it more interactively than usual. But let me just create a little bit of a kind of construction of what happens and why we are here where we are. So what are the biggest hardships that we had in the last few years? And I think one of the biggest one was obviously COVID in 2020, which created this kind of more online and streaming demand, going away from cinema, going away from DVDs and all these stuff, including, but also creating this remote work environment, basically. So it was on one side easier to work for a studio, but also now everyone can work for a studio as long as the law and so on allows it, basically. And then we had the big actors strike in 2023 that went from July to November 2023, which meant less production. So over this whole time, basically half a year, there was no productions, which at that specific moment didn't really matter because there was obviously the production that started earlier. But then in 2024, all this production that stopped for half a year, they needed to pick up, but they didn't need visual effects at that moment, for example. And then obviously the big one that recently, the Technicolor closing, which led to closing of MPC, the mill, and Macros Animation, and around a layoff of 10,000 people. So I think that was the big impact, especially the last basically 5 years of constantly bigger production and shift of the industry and so on. I think that is also the thing. And also Technicolor specifically mentioned that COVID-19 was one of the reasons of the closure. They literally suffered from this big impact on their kind of income. And then obviously all the other thing kind of crash them at the end. Also, we have good news. So Micros Animation was bought by Rodeo FX. Basically, exciting news. We acclaimed studio behind Paw Patrol and so on, Dark Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in joining the Rodeo FX network. So not everyone is going away. Not every kind of property or studio is gone. So in this case, for example, Micros will be taken over from Technicolor to Rodeo FX. And one of the things that I wanted to also take an opportunity to read one of the posts that of another studio that sadly closed as well. It was from Phil Dobry, who is the founder of Jellyfish Pictures. And I really liked the post, and I thought it was kind of interesting to also bring it on in the beginning of this conversation. Jellyfish Pictures, a fond and sad farewell. When I founded Jellyfish Pictures in 2001, all we wanted to do was to work on projects we loved with people we loved working with. In the still nascent but exciting world of VFX, or computer animation as we called it back then. Innocent and naive to the hug challenge of succeeding as a creative business in the UK, let alone in such a tough sector, we had to make huge personal sacrifices, as every business owner and entrepreneur must. My mantra was always to grow slowly and within our means. The primary motivation for growth was never about money or working on a great project. It was for the thrill and privilege of bringing talented, like-minded people together to create amazing images and stories. My ambition was to help grow our industry in the UK. Jellyfish became a large, complex living organism, delicate and special, a family and a community of colleagues and friends, a home and haven to thousands of brilliant creative people. Perhaps we became the victim of our own success. Rapid growth while keeping the essential DNA that brought this success in a different challenge to sustain in a creative business like Jellyfish. The recent struggle in our sector are well documented. Without industry support and regulation, unstoppable market forces have resulted in a race to the bottom. Compounded by the unprecedented challenges of COVID, global economic turmoil, industrial action, and content wars. Without the support and vision from the industry, we are reliant on our sector, which has done so much to contribute to its success, has inevitably struggles. Jellyfish Pictures, a fragile and beautiful business, a home of community of talented people, accoladed and milestone we won, are a testament to our achievements. You will always be my family. We so nearly found you a way through. Up until the very end, our reputation and brand shone brightly. The messages, love, and support received over the last few weeks is a huge testament to what we achieved together. We all deeply feel the loss. You truly deserve the very best. Thank you to all your many Jellyfish heroes who have achieved too much against the odds, and we did it our way quite incredibly. BAFTAs, Emmys, Annie, and so on and so on and so forth. And so that was, I really like that post, because it kind of summarized, like, you know, you try your best, you make a studio that wants to be not to grow too fast, and you still kind of end up in this complex system. And then a final quote before we dive into the topic a little bit is by Scott Ross, who is the co-founder of Digital Domain, who also worked for ILM, and he has a new book, which I highly recommend. It's really great. Upstart, the Digital Film Revolution, Managing the Unmanageable. And he says in this book, the visual effects business is all about imagination. So why couldn't we ever imagine a better way of doing business? Why couldn't we imagine to taking back our power? Why couldn't we imagine coming together to demand change before it was too late? What we want to do now is we would like to address a few things that we believe are important for kind of a better future, especially for the studios, but also maybe for ourselves. And so again, if you have comments to certain elements, if you have experience or questions or whatever, just raise your hands and we can include you in the conversation. And Alan, obviously, if you just want to say something, feel free. So one of the big things, I think, and it was mentioned a lot of studios, is the fixed bits in visual effects. So a lot of studios have fixed bids against their big production houses. So if Disney comes to ILM, they say, okay, you will do this visual effects for, I don't know, 20, 30, 50 million, and that's it. And then ILM has to figure out if they can do it, or they give the bid, and then they accept the contract. And what happens often, Disney or Warner Brothers or whoever, they want changes, constant changes, last minute changes. Maybe the deadline will be moved earlier or something, without paying the studio the extra money, which means the studio has to produce more stuff, has to hire more people without an increase of the income, basically. And that leads to a lot of studios that make minus on a lot of productions in the hope that the next production will have. And that's a really, really big problem. And it seems to be a constant kind of struggle for a lot of studios to get a profit margin from each project. Because uninvitable, most projects have changes that are not calculated enough into the contract, and then later are not paid out because the production houses expect the changes and they don't want to pay it often. And then the studio has to take the loss, basically. And so that is, I see, as one of the things that influences that. And that includes, obviously, lower payment for the artist because they don't have much money. They have to make changes they don't get money for. And obviously overtime because of all the changes that are done without payment. I mean, free changes, who wouldn't accept that as a studio, basically? So I think that is definitely one of the big problems we have to face. And I think there's a big push that has to come from the studios and producers in general to kind of stop that, or never accept a contract that has a fixed bid, because it's impossible in visual effects, animation, and games to predict 100% how the production will go in and how much it will cost. And especially with all the changes. And I think that is the breaking point, basically. How about you, Alan? You have a studio. Is that also a problem in your studio, basically?
Well, I think at a certain point, everyone in the industry kind of confronted with the situation where whether you have a big or a small project, the client comes to you, whether it's commercial, TV series, feature film, proof of concept, doesn't matter, and says, I have this budget and I need these shots to be done. And here I think that a tricky thing starts to happen, because one way, if you're not having any project, that amount of money can actually keep the studio floating and help you go along the way, or might win you a client, which then on the next term might have a better deal. Obviously, these kind of things don't happen as much, but especially at the very beginning, you want to find the best options for the client and show that you can be trustworthy and that you can do a good job. But then on the other hand is a matter of negotiating and agreeing to what you're doing for that amount of money, because then obviously the competition, and I think this is another subject we'll get back to later when we talk about competition versus partnership. But the competition being fierce, having in mind the number of projects going on, it's a difficult balance to deal with, because you do some things, obviously some changes can go out of scope, but some of them you say, okay, it doesn't take too much, let's do it. But then they keep adding. So you're trying to have a conversation with the producer or with a other supervisor or the client. And in some cases, obviously it happens, they understand, say, okay, send us a bid for the updated versions or for the extra work, because this was not in the initial bid. It's a very sensitive subject, I think, for all the studios there. But I think the sensitive part is in regards to how well you can set the expectation with the client and, what's the actual financial situation of the studio. Because even if, and this also leads to underbidding, which is obviously not beneficial for the industry. But when there's a studio in a difficult situation, maybe that amount can make or break. And you might want to, just that one project, which is 10 or 20% underbid, you can still make it. Yeah. And you can cross the bridge and survive. So then you can stay longer. It's not something, ideally, it's not something, it's encouraged. I'm just saying this from a purely economical perspective.
But I mean, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense to me. And again, there's often the problem between logical and realistical. Sometimes sometimes logical is not what actually happens. And but for me, it's just as a business, I'm also a business owner. The first rule of business is staying in business. And I cannot stay in business if I make minus on any project. Like, and there is only one exception that I will ever accept to make minus on a project if I have a clear investment in whatever I do. Like, for example, obviously this typical thing, big investment, Disney, Netflix, you have this now on your resume name in your project, in your studio, and whatever. That is an investment. You invest minus business to get some name recognition, basically. That is, I understand that. You can do it at one time, maybe, but I will never understand someone saying like, oh, we cannot push back on them because they want changes that, because at the end of the day, I understand you calculate a margin into your bid. Like let's say you add 10% as changes, but then when the changes go over the 10%, you just go, okay, we were over the 10%. You can either pay us more or stop changes. And for me, just as a business owner, I would just not understand how anyone will say, besides, again, this one exception of investing into something that you can do once, not every project. I will never understand someone say, yeah, you know what, we make, I don't know, 500,000 minus on this project, but we cannot tell Disney or whoever that they don't pay us. I just don't understand the logic of the production here, basically, and the business here.
You're totally right. And from this point of view, this brings us again to setting the expectation to the client and making sure from the very beginning, where the work starts and where it stops.
But a lot of the production companies will don't care. Like I heard it a lot. They come already with the preconception. You can say whatever you want. They know that they have the power, especially the big ones, and they come with the expectation that you will pay them, or they will not pay for it because they will take away your project in the future, basically, kind of like under the thing. So I think there is a little, like, obviously not most studios are not working for Disney and Warner Brothers and stuff. We all have project that has nothing to do with Disney and Warner Brothers and whatever, basically. So I think in this case, it's definitely what you say. I think expectation creation is important, but in some cases like this, I think you can create as many expectations as you want. I think they will just ignore it because they're used to not having them,
If you're, from my point of view, if you're ever in this kind of position, we were in this kind of position for a certain project, not for, Disney or Marvel or, other, commercial vendors or advertising or different type of projects where, the situation could not come to a understanding to where our work ends, even though we met every criteria and even, on the emails, everything said everything's approved, everything is fine. And then they just came back, because we changed our minds or whatever, we don't want to pay extra. Obviously these are situations, but from my point of view is you don't want to keep working with those kind of clients. It's the kind of, okay, you have to make sure until you reach that point to have some payments. And as a business owner, you have to take the decision if you're taking a fall, whether you're stopping the project then, and I don't know, you still have 20 or 30% of the money to receive. And maybe the client won't pay you the remaining one if you don't do the changes. Sure. Or you can start, go legal, but this always can go for a long way and it's not always a good thing to do. So you can start to take the fall and try to be, more cautious next time. But again, you always try to be cautious, obviously. And you kind of always try to, these kind of situations can surprise you at the same time. It's a very tricky part. Also, the another tricky part is the VFX industry does not have high profit margins. So you're like, I don't know, 5-10% max.
Yes.
And if you take into account the fact that just to have a global overview, between more developed countries or countries which still have the industry starting to develop, like for example we have in Romania. Obviously, in the US or UK or Germany, you would pay the same for licenses, for servers, for infrastructure, and the other, all the visual effects industry studios will pay the same for this kind of services. So in terms of profit, it's, the profit is even thinner. So it's more difficult to try to adjust. Obviously, you try to optimize wherever possible, but at the same time, you want to have a good quality because this brings you new projects.
What do you mean, like profit is thinner? Because for you, the prices are higher because of your, I don't know, economic situation, or what do you mean the profit is thinner than Germany or something?
Well, imagine obviously the cost. Some clients come to. Usually, clients choose different regions because of the tax incentive or because of different costs per studio. For example, it's no secret that Eastern Europe has slightly more competitive cost than Germany or UK, or in US the cost really higher because the cost of living is different there. But obviously you have higher costs in the US, for example, with artists because the cost of living is higher.
Yep.
And they calculate all their costs to, renting new corn farms and software and everything for that specific. But on our end, even though the costs are more competitive from this point of view, still the cost for licenses and infrastructure is the same as the big studio.
You don't get a discount in like Romania or something from Autodesk?
There are obviously several deals here and there. But it's not like that's helping the entire thing. It was just another thing to have in mind.
Totally understand.
So it's the key point is, as an industry, we're having low profit margins, and it's difficult to negotiate this. And maybe because you mentioned something regarding the make it or break it, I think there are two, from the way I see things, the way there are two kind of ways to approach this financially. One of them would be if you're a studio or a group of freelancers trying to do jobs, you're trying to calculate all your costs, monthly costs, and maybe there are periods when you're from month to month, or like 2-3 months you have some income, then there's a stop. But they're having in mind the amounts are not so big, you can start to see, one project or one invoice at the right time might keep things floating.
Yeah.
Where if you're a bigger company, you start to calculate things of, profit and loss per year, meaning if I underbid, and I'm not saying, this is the right way to do things. Everyone, has the right to do on their own perspective. But if you're a bigger company and you say, if I underbid this project, I'm not losing, let's say 1 million, I'm losing only 500,000.
Yeah.
Because it's more like an yearly estimate. So probably economically, this makes more sense for them. Just detaching a bit and trying to see, okay, if this works or not. So it's a different business model. Obviously, this starts to make again some other competition, which is not like the right ingredient for an industry which should start to become stable and healthy. Because this issues, and what you mentioned before with everything happening in the past couple of years with the industry, obviously there are issues which started now, but they're not new. These are just some symptoms we started to develop, and they're issues we've been confronting on one way or another for the past 20 years or something.
Actually, I'm just reading this book by Scott Ross, and he was working at ILM during Jurassic Park, Terminator 2 and stuff. He literally said the same things in 1990. He had like ILM was basically a minus studio. It was doing minus, and in his time, ILM become profitable basically for the first time, because they changed a lot of the workflow and the bidding, and they had to fight back like Disney and whoever they work with, because they were just doing a minus profit on each project, basically, So it is a problem for the last 35 years, basically, at least. And so it's a really crazy thing. And the thing what happens also with the low bidding is, imagine they have to finish more shots because of the changes in the same amount of time. So they have to hire more people to finish the shots. And since they have less money because they don't get paid for this extra thing, they have to hire lower income people, like lower kind of like underpay artists, on overwork artists, maybe not pay overtime because they don't have the money to do that, basically, because they already kind of go into a losing fashion, but they still have to deliver on time. Yeah. Even though you have maybe suddenly 300 shots more of the changes space because of that. And I think that is a really big, we mix it up between the broad studio perspective and the individual perspective. Another one is reducing film and game costs. I think the current trend of making 320 million films for an absolute boring snooze fest like Electric State is just unsustainable. Comparably to Godzilla -1, which has a higher IMDb rating, won the Oscar for visual effects and cost 10 to 15 million. Obviously, this is an extreme example. Most movies will not cost 10 to 15 million on that kind of scale of visual effects because it was a unique situation where the director was also the visual effects supervisor. It was a kind of tag team, like everybody everywhere all at once kind of situation, basically. So it will cost more, but it doesn't have to cost 320 million to make a normal visual effects thing. And I think if we reduce the cost, it will just create a more healthy environment where not every project has to be a $1 billion profit margin to be successful, basically, because this often doesn't include the marketing budget. It could be 500 million at the end because usually marketing budget is double the original budget, basically. So it's insane. And I think that is a big problem that I don't need to see a 320 million movie all the time. Like, like once a while an Avatar kind of, okay. But I personally, I probably will not notice if a movie is 100 million or 200 million, 300 million, bro. I don't think so. Especially if you have a good team, I don't think that is really a big kind of thing. I think it's just overblown situation.
Obviously, like you mentioned, the examples you mentioned are somehow on the extreme to prove a point. After the pandemic, the COVID pandemic happened, there's been a high infuse of content, which obviously led to not so well developed stories. And it keeps happening. It will happen. I mean, even if you look at the history of movie releases, every now and then we had this kind of a high budget movie which didn't manage to convince the audience in terms of story, because in terms of look, Electric State is amazing. There's a lot of incredible work done there. Thousands of people, you can see it's really well crafted visually. But I think, there's some underdevelopment on the story part. At least this is how, I resonated, or the audience resonated with it, having in mind, the notes. You can have the Flow example, which won the Oscar for animation, and it was again an indie project basically, but it had a good story. So even having in mind what's been happening with budgets and cuts and so forth, the story somehow still managed to survive as being the main key insight for people watching or not watching. It doesn't matter if you're spending 10 million, 1 million, or 20 million. You always see in the history of film releases and awards these kind of hidden gems or exceptions where out of nowhere there's a low budget movie which kind of blows everything away because it has this kind of unique approach. Obviously, this is hard to copy because we cannot all make surprises at the same time. And obviously, after a while, when some big company sees the success of one project like this, they're trying to bring things down, see what worked, what not, and try to replicate a success, which then turns into a recipe, which then makes the audience bored about having the same recipe all over again. And this is why I think now is a good moment, having in mind everything going on, even with AI and so forth, where there's a high probability and high possibility of us developing better stories and working more on the stories part technologies.
And in general,
more
like
more.
smaller project, just kind of
Yeah. I mean,
doesn't have to for 300 million. Like it can have this like one avatar. If you expect something to blow up because it's a good IP, like a Lord of the Rings, obviously, like you can invest more into a Lord of the Rings because it's a successful IP, or Star Wars or whatever. Then you can make it a more bigger project. Obviously, it needs more effects also. But some like Electric State, like I know there is a book series with that compared, but
Yeah.
it's not a famous IP in a big sense. It's not a Game of Thrones kind of famous even before. So, and it is a big project also because of the amount of robots and whatever. So I feel like this is also a very risky project.
It is risky, but at the same time, this is how it happened with projects like Stranger Things. That there wasn't much of a fan base or something.
But the story of Stranger Things was good. I think, and that's the point basically that you're making.
We get back to the story. Obviously, I can understand this point of view that companies need to take risks sometimes and invest more in an IP which they think they'll hit and bring them the success, because probably with the success of one or two such projects, they can sustain another 4 or 5 other tryouts, which sometimes, don't return the expected results. But I think that from our point of view is, again, the idea of not having the tools to tell a good story is not necessarily related to budget.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think if Electric State would be 100 million, no one would notice in a big sense. Like, no one will sit like, oh, this is an ugly movie or something, or like they will not watch it because the effects only, or the whole budget is only 100 million, basically. I absolutely not believe that will true. Maybe the visual effects and a few of the elements will not be, the best, basically, but as long as the rest is okay, you don't mind if something is like, has not the perfect shader and the perfect lighting or the perfect grip in the background working or something like that, So, and the expectation for the movie will be lower, like in terms of profit.
Yeah, because you have, for example, The Creator, which I quite enjoyed, and wasn't a high budget movie. But the project and the visual effects and the craft of it and the story was, I know, he kept me on the edge of my seat. So it was, but at the same time, that project I felt did not receive the amount of gratitude it deserved. So again, we're coming back to a marketing perspective, or maybe we get again to the way the consumer changes behavior, because this is another huge topic, having in mind, we went from cinema after the pandemic, then streaming. Now there's a lot of people who are, their attention span is short and we like to watch more TikToks and so forth. The way we consume cinema has changed again. And then the way we consume stories changed again. So all these changes make things to, for the clients as well, for the studios to see, okay, what do we need to change to bring new, to adapt? For us as artists, okay, how can we keep telling a good story? Because we need to hook everyone very fast. And it's a very fine balance of trying to establishing all these, budget and story and marketing and giving the awards to whom actually, just like I was saying with The Creator, amazing movie, incredible story and artwork, and overall as a motion picture, but it felt it didn't get the necessary gratitude.
But I mean that's also a big problem. I feel like the motion pictures lost extremely. I know it. They lost a lot extremely in relevance because they start to reward movies that no one cares and no one saw. Actually, like a lot of the movies that get an award, like no one, like who is that? What is that movie? I've never seen that in my life. And a lot of people don't actually like the movies that become the highest, nominated or whatever. And so it's also like a thing where Oscars, which were a long time like a big indicator for what should you watch. I was always watching the best film of the Oscars. Like if it was nominated for best film, like 15 years ago, I was watching it the moment I saw, oh wow, it's in my cinema, let's go. Nowadays, if it's the best movie, I will have absolutely avoid it. It's probably the worst thing you can find on anywhere, because the Oscars pick the worst everything. It's very rare to pick something that I find good. And again, you can see it by the view count. The view count dropped so extremely that basically every YouTuber has more views on their live streams than the Oscars nowadays. Like the big YouTubers. And you just mentioned something which I also saw in warning sign for Hollywood. Younger consumers are choosing creator content over premium TV and movies, which means TikToks, Twitch, YouTube, and so on. And that is also creates a different market where a lot of people that usually was watching cinema, DVDs, whatever, are suddenly spending more time, Netflix, suddenly spending more time on free platforms like YouTube or Twitch or whatever, and just spend all their money and all their time on that platform, and instead of paying for Netflix or Disney Plus or going to the cinema. And I think that also creates a big kind of disconnect between the profit margin and the investment into the projects. If you have this like 300 million Netflix film, which you actually have hard to count how this actually affects your subscription base, basically, it's crazy, basically. So I think that is a really, really big problem. To your point, is also the successful content is comes back to the costs. If you hire the cost, you have to make successful content. And we saw a lot of these examples with the Rings of Power, for example, which maybe was successful for Amazon. I don't know. It seems to be, it created enough subscription for Prime. So maybe it was successful, but no one likes it, basically. I don't think more people like Rings of Power and a lot of these kind of content. And so the question is, isn't it important to make content that people actually want to watch? And you see a lot of these kind of broken franchises where they decide during a franchise in the next iteration to change the direction of the game. It's now cutesy versus dark and moody, kind of like, and then it's like completely different game, a different movie, and so on, basically.
I think there are two things here we have to understand, not just as a visual effects artist or, owners of businesses, but also as clients and everyone involved in the, not just say film industry, but entertainment industry. One of it would be that everything that's happening now, and we discussed, with the bidding, with the content, the consumer behavior change, with the franchises, with trying to make niches, or recipes which are for a success. These are not necessarily things we should blame on, because there's nothing we can change about what's happening. These are the things we should try to understand and see how we can adapt, because we cannot change the behavior of millions of people preferring TikTok or YouTube or over a Netflix. Like, we cannot change it directly. What we can do is try to do our own version of what we think is good and try to promote it and learn from that and keep experiencing, which is again leads us to the second part of, obviously there's been some projects which needed more story development, or they were not according to everyone, agreement, let's say so, which obviously made the sales go down. But at the same time, because I'm trying to, put myself in different perspective, different shoes, if I'm trying to see what the next thing would be, as a client, as a, film developer, obviously I would have to say, okay, let me try these 5 new directions. One of it is this kind of direction, one of it is this direction. Let's try more artsy film or indie or independent or high budget or whatever. And I'm going to put them in the market. So there's a risk in going for each direction, and probably only one will hit. So it's again a matter of testing and see what sticks somehow. Obviously there's huge statistics behind it, and And
but then you don't make all of them like 300 million test projects.
Yeah, that's
what I mean. Like
discussion. Exactly.
That's the big problem also.
I mean, you can try developing like 10 different styles or projects with 10, 50, 20 million, see which one comes up successfully. And I think this would be another way of seeing where the consumer would go. Okay. Because obviously we had a 10, 15 years of superhero movies. I liked them. I enjoyed them. They're a different category of movies than, what I would consider, Fincher or Denis Villeneuve, or, they have a different style. There's a different type of cinema there. But at the same time, there's place, there's space under the sun for everyone, I think, which can find their own style. So we have this, but once we insist too much on a niche, then people get saturated with that and they want to try something else. And then all the other issues start to flow.
But I mean, Marvel is a good example here, because at the end of the day, it had such a long run successfully with relatively great movies. And then after Endgame, it just completely nosedive basically, and just stop being good. Like you literally just stop producing something people generally liked and enjoyed to watch basically. And they now are so in the minus with starting with the last few Captain America, for example, that it becomes like, and they seem to go this direction. They continue to go this direction instead of adjusting course. And it's higher level project. It's not a 50 million, 100 million project is often like, with marketing budget, 600 million for one bet, basically, and it's sometimes really crazy. Fabio, want to add something?
Yeah, I feel like more so in games than in film, they are missing a lot of the point of the game. They're missing the customers of their game. I feel like they're actually making enemies out of themselves. It's like, there is no point in making games that's made for like 18, 20 years old men and just missing out on the point of the main character, or making like some minority or something that's just for some, I would say, auto gratification on the point. It's like you have to appeal to your audience. It's like that's something that's really went missing in the last 5 years or so in a lot of games. You can see Concord, you can see there's a couple of titles that went out this year that make no sense. If you
Dragon Age, the Wildguard, Assassin's Creed Shadows.
There was one other one that's come like this week. It's like, not a Concord, as a single player that's come out this week. Is like the main character is really ugly. It's like, you are appealing to 12, 20 years old men, just make it sexually appeasing. So it's not good, but that's what your audience wants. It's not gonna make a 12-year-old girl buy that game that's violent or so on. You're just suiciding yourself in a lot of ways. And
but that is what I basically mentioned is, and that is part of also of the industry, because in Concord there was famously called positivity, basically. So in Concord you could not criticize the character's design, because it was considered, you have to be like positive about everything. You cannot go to the character designer and say, this character doesn't look good. People will not like to play it. And in Concord, you will literally shut down the Concord production, because people didn't want people to be negative to each other, and criticize each other. And then it handed up to one of the ugliest characters in any shooter, basically, at the end of the day. And that's what I mean, is like, I don't say it's only high level thing. It's also between the artist of like making better art that is appealing, like the modeler has some kind of input to that. Obviously there's a lead, there's a supervisor, there's a director, there's a lot of layers in there, but everyone in a production can put a little bit pressure to make it better, basically. Also,
you can make uglier character, but has to be a point on why it is like that.
Make sense to the story, basically.
Yeah, it's like depends on the target you are searching for, right? It's like
exactly.
Not like you're making an Animal Crossing with like monster that scare everyone. It's like, what are you making? It's like that's a 6-year-old game that's friendly, and you have to make it a point for that game.
Yeah.
They're missing a lot of. It's like the industry is already in a difficult stage, and then everyone is just suiciding themselves. It's like,
Yeah.
why?
Again, I think what I call it is it's activism. Basically, I feel there's a lot of activism in video games and films nowadays, where people want to bring their political beliefs, their cultural beliefs into that, and say, "Oh, this is the only way this game has to be correct, to be good, to be whatever." And then they don't care what people actually want to play. They care what they want to see, what they want to have. And I think that is sometimes a little bit too much, because you can do that in the indie project. You can do whatever you want in the indie project. You can just make everyone whatever, a dolphin. And just that's the whole game about. But in a massive 300 million game, making every character a dolphin is a little bit risky. It could backfire extremely, because maybe people don't want to play as a dolphin. Maybe they want to play as some whatever, and because that is what is the main thing. Like, you don't make a Call of Duty and then make everyone a dolphin in Call of Duty with a gun. It feels a little bit risky, I would say, but that's what a lot of people seem to do nowadays. And that's also, again, there is some responsibility on the artist itself, including supervisors and whatever. And obviously there's a lot of responsibility also on the studios and the production houses who decide this kind of thing, basically, and say, no, we're going this 100%. So that's why I see like the balance going on here, basically. One of the things that I want to address, and I mean that for the studios and I mean that for the artists, is alternative income sources. I think one of the things that we underdeveloped a little bit in visual effects, and I think we need it as a studio and we need it as artists, we need to figure out that we don't live 100% from one specific source of income. In terms of studios, there is this thing where a lot of successful studios, they have commercial and visualization departments in them, like Framestore, Macrovision. And if you talk to them, their main revenue are commercials and visualization. Their prestige is film. So film gives them the big screen, the big things. But what their main income is, as Alan just said before, the margin in film is super low, or visual effects specifically is super low. Commercial margin is much higher. Visualization for Porsche, visualization for architecture, whatever, is much higher. And they have less fixed bid. I remember that I worked at Macrovision, and I think we worked for Porsche or something. And they literally, if they want you to re-render something, because they ask you to re-render because maybe you have to replace the screw. It's not screw B75, it's screw B78. They will pay you for this screw re-rendering. Literally, there will be no discussion. It's just literally you render, we pay you. It's automatically, because that's how like car industry business make. Like, that's normal for them, And the same thing is the alternatives. Obviously, you can sell products, you can sell 3D assets, you can sell like RenderMan software or something like that. And the same thing I think applies also for the visual effects artists. At this moment, the industry is so volatile and so unsafe. I think in general, it makes sense to every visual effects artist to think about alternative incomes. Doesn't mean you have to work 60 hours, 80 hours a week. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making investments into things, having something that you can use. For example, you are a modeler, you have 2-3 months between jobs. You create some models or whatever and sell it on a website or something, or sell it on, for example, 3D printing websites. I don't say it's a great situation, but I say it creates a little bit of a buffer. If you have a second income, that is maybe not big, but it creates some kind of income. And you can use this also as a second job when you are in between jobs, for example, especially if you're in a freelance situation. So I think that is definitely something that is, again, not optimal, but I think it creates a little bit of a buffer of visual effects is not good. There's maybe sometimes not many jobs. I still have something I can use as an income, So that's how I see what we can do basically as studios and as artists. One of the things I think we need more artist protection. As someone who comes from Germany, I was a little bit shocked when I started to work in visual effects, but I was even more shocked when I started to work in visual effects outside of Germany. And the two things that I don't understand is overtime regulation. I never will understand how you cannot be paid for overtime. That just doesn't, in my mind, it blows me away. I was working at Weta. Every minute I worked at Weta was paid. Every minute I worked there, it was paid. So it was clear. There was no discussion. And then what I also never understood, and that's also very strong in Germany generally, is cancellation periods. Like I know people who just let go tomorrow and that's it. Like you don't get paid. Like for me, it's like, okay, depending how long you work, you should at least have a 1 month of cancellation, your resignation period, or maybe 3 months, depending like how big the contract is. Like if it's a 1-year contract, there should be like 3 months. If it's a 6 3-month contract, it should be like 1 month, because it's if it's like faster than what is expected, or maybe there's an undefined contract, it should be at least 3 months, because you need to be able to prepare for the situation to like, hey, I have to leave in 1 month or 3 months. I find a new job. I change my whatever, I think this is something I will never understand, that they just can, oh, sorry, we don't need you. You can pack your bags tomorrow, basically. And then it's like, okay. And so for me, this is like a big, big problem, because it also creates a lot of insecurity, a lot of trust issues, and it's just not a good lifestyle, basically. So I think this has to kind of stop a little bit, and this has to come from the artist enforcing that, which I did. Like in previous, I had contract negotiations where they offered me 6 months, and I just said, I will never work for you and move to a new country if you cannot give me a 1-year contract. They gave me a 1-year contract, because for me, moving to a new country for a 6 months contract that maybe was prolonged or not, it was just out of question, basically. I understand not everyone can, but for me it was like, and again, what happened in this situation, I asked for it and I got it. Doesn't always mean like that, but in theory, if you don't ask and if you don't see this as a necessity, there is a chance that people will use this opportunity to squeeze you in that situation, basically. And the same thing for cancellation and resignation things, like where you need to have this in the contract, that when something happens, they at least have some leeway before they can just dismiss you, basically.
I think you're right about this, and it comes from the artist, but I think it also should come from studio owners, from government as well. The way I see things, this sensitive subject is also highly linked to the idea of partnerships, because I feel, having in mind what's happening right now, within our industry, things probably could, in order to try to create a better environment for the businesses, for the artists, for everyone involved, I think, smaller or mid-sized studios, because it makes more sense for them to have more partnership and collaborative process, can help them more, and also can help to keep the artists more in their studio, and offer a more stable environment, because then you would not start to get to this cycle of, now I have work for 1 month, now I don't, now I'm scaling up, getting people, I have to let them go, and so forth. But this kind of partnership sort of relies on trust between, companies, making sure that, if I'm pitching a project, those guys can help me with, and we can share resources and talent, and, obviously have everything transparent with the client. But certain groups like this can also take advantage from different regions of the world, if they're incentive and so forth. But for you as a studio, can give you a more stable environment. I would rather not have 6 months being super, super overcrowded with work, and the rest of 6 months to have nothing. I would rather have, decent amount of work, or just to, keep things running, and which is stable, but no, I have the entire thing for 1 year, because this means, people have work for 1 year, the artist, and then in that year, then you can start to develop other things. Maybe, you start doing your own IPs at a studio, or, you go to other conferences, you start to meet people, you start to develop other projects, maybe you have an idea of a script or a game, or, something else. But this kind of long-term thinking, and being more in a partnership where studio of 30, 50, 100 people can work with other, which happens, there are examples in this world, in the industry, But I think we can go to the next level and try to be more, to pay more attention to this criteria.
And again, both. I see both of the last points are basically the connection. So I see studios should find more revenue sources to create a more stable income, and artists should find more revenue sources to, as you said, like maybe you have only 6 months of work, and then maybe you have a teaching job for 6 months, or you sell your assets online for the whole rest of the year, basically. You know what I mean? So there's always something that balances it out, so you don't have this zero, like literally like the stock market kind of situation of jobs and income and and at the same time, by creating artist protection, it can only work if the studio has more stability. Obviously, you cannot. It's hard for a studio to protect an artist if they basically literally just lost their project, because Disney pulls up or someone else just pulls away the project, and so it's hard. But at the same time, I see the artist being part of the kind of push to say, hey, that is my minimum. I need that. I cannot go to London for £1,500 like a month or whatever if my rent is £2,000 basically. Exactly. I cannot go move to US from Europe for a 6 months contract or something like that, where I also have to pay the travel and stuff like that. It's just something where I just feel like it obviously there is certain problems with studios making it work, but there's also this where the artist can to some degree just say, this is I will not do it. I will rather work somewhere else and do something else for a few months than doing this risky investment, which it is basically. Mm-hmm. You do a risky investment and then suddenly it explodes because your contract was only 3 months, or you didn't have protection when you get resignation or something, or resigned from.
I completely agree with you with this approach. I feel at the same time, there is also another factor we need to take in account, which I experienced myself like 11 or 12 years ago when I went to London to work. There are artists who, at some point they're having, a good offer or decent amount. They don't know, where things are at, or it's kind of make it or break it for them. I had a friend who came to London just with a one-way ticket. It's like, okay, I'm going to try and find something there. And he did. He find something and, things worked out for him. But for some people and some artists, maybe, that's the only option they got. So they have to take a risk as well. Obviously, this does not explain the behavior of companies or to take advantage of that, but at the same time, I'm just trying to illustrate a different perspective. Like some people might say, okay, I took the chance as well. It's not. It would be like make it or break it, because I was always trying to see, okay, will I try to make things work financially until I get the next contract, or will they extend me or not? But in the end, everything was okay. Maybe some artists have this one offer and they don't have any job for a long period of time, and maybe that could be the saving grace for them. Realistically, at the same time, obviously, you should try to negotiate everything to your own advantage. And if you're doing this, even if you're in a bad spot, try to get the most of it. And make sure
that I think that is probably the most important comment, which is like, even if you're desperate, even if you need this contract, it doesn't mean you cannot negotiate, which is exactly. Like just to be clear for everyone who's listening here, negotiation never breaks a contract. Never. If you negotiate, on the other side, they understand, and it will never break a contract just because you ask. The only way you can break a contract in this is if you demand. Then people break negotiations and they will stop. But if you say this is my salary expectations, for me it's important that I have a 1-year contract. If you say that, they not automatically will say, oh, if it's like 1-year contract, we'll stop the conversation here. It's always then sorry or okay or whatever. If you can always ask for what you need and what you want and explain why. For example, if they say £2,000 for a month in London, and you say, for me, it only works with £3,000. Like it's a random number. It's don't take it with no. For me, it works for 3,000 because the flat is £2,000, £1,500, groceries, blah, blah, blah. Just for living, I need £3,000. I calculated it like 3,125 pounds. You make it a crazy number so it sounds legit. That's it. And then they can say yes or no to that. And then you can still try to get to a number that is better for you. But just accepting it because you didn't have a job for 6 months, it kind of creates this spiral of continuing in the same bad situation. Because if you accept this bad contract, you spiral basically with a money loss or a low money income that basically doesn't allow you to survive the next 6 months, basically, because then you don't have savings because the contract is so bad, or they fire you because there was no protection of that kind of, And so that is what I want to call that. It's artist protections requirement for the studios, and they have to pick up, but it's also artist protection by the artist itself by negotiating stronger, learning negotiation skills if necessary, because if you don't negotiate, most studios will take advantage because they also have to squeeze the money. But at the end of the day, they also need artists. It's not like they just can run around and just say, oh yeah, whatever, we have millions of artists that we can hire, basically, Silent voice. The VFX industry for the longest time has been Wild West. Being laid off from MPC was a silent let go. If I didn't have insiders, I wouldn't have heads up for my dismiss. This is crazy. Like that you literally basically come to work and then maybe you get an email like, sorry, pack your bags and you can leave, basically. I've never experienced it in my life. I've never been let go. I've never had this weird situation, basically. I always resign myself to go to the next opportunity. So I didn't have this experience yet. So I'm kind of like fortunate in this case. So, but it's also a little bit who you work for. And again, now MPC doesn't exist anymore, but they had a relatively bad reputation when it comes to how they treat the artist in terms of the structure. I heard a lot of people liked their time at MPC, even if it was stressful, but they also had a lot of times where they burned down their artists because the work was so extreme and so fast and so mega, basically. There's another comment here from Giriya. Hi, I was software developer transitioned into compositing artist just after COVID, but based on the current scenario of our visual effects industry, what do you suggest? Do I need to go back to software or keep exploring? Also, industry is like the vegetable market and companies are taking advantage of this by paying less pay. And I'm from MPC India mentioning this because no one is considering MPC Technicolor India financially or in other ways. Oh, this is always a little bit hard to answer. But I mean, at the end of the day, obviously, even in visual effects, I always recommend technical roles. It's just that you don't have to become technical, you don't have to become a software developer. But I'm a big, you probably, if you know me a little bit, you know that I'm a big supporter of technical artists and technical director. I believe they are just the safest roles you can have in the industry, because you need them in the beginning, you need them in the middle, and you need them at the end. It's a little bit like a lead or supervisor. You need them very early in the production, and you need them until the end of the production. So in general, I believe the more technical you can be, obviously by your interest, the safer your role is. So if you have the software background and you want to stay in visual effects, animation, and games, I would recommend to maybe switch more to the technical directing role kind of direction, which I believe is just a stronger environment, better contracts, better pay, and safer contract in general, basically. Oh yeah, okay. AI regulation. I don't want to go too deeper, but Alan, I want to, before you leave, I want to have this one quickly with you. VFX collaborations, because you mentioned that, and you are owner of a studio. Basically, I think you can give us a little bit into that one.
Always the film industry has been about collaborative, and you always see in big studios and big productions, different studios collaborating. What I'm aiming here at is something more towards the idea of similar size studio, or with complementary skills, can somehow team up and try to get projects to do together. Because from this point of view, they can also tap into bigger markets, because each and every one can somehow, have their own clients and their own infrastructure for sales. But they also have some relying partners behind. For example, we're doing a show and you don't have as many compers, but maybe the companies you partner up with, it doesn't have to be necessarily official. It has to be a really good collaboration, or you're friends with one of the company.
Like handshake contracts.
Yeah, here's a lot of trust involved. Sure. But, when you start to meet people who are having, like mindset, obviously you make contracts with them for the projects and everything, but
sure,
you can, hey, we're having this project, we need 10 more compers or 20 more previous artists or whatever. And they're good at that part. It's easy, and on their end, maybe you're doing a fix better than they do, and then they can share that part to you. So if you're thinking of this kind of structure on the long term, it might sustain all the involved studios. Obviously, it works with smaller ones, I think, because it's easier to sustain and to spread the work. But the collaboration part is from this point of view, which I feel can offer a more sustainable on the long term strategy for the studios and also for the artists. And again, we're dipping into the subject of, I'm having a 2 months or 3 months contract compared to I can have like a 1 month or 3 months or 3 years contract at one company, and I can stay there, I can develop, or I can learn the team, learn the collaborators. And then you would see the other partners, like the other studios, which are partners, as extended teams,
Yep.
which have very specific or other departments. And things can, because then it's easier to align on the pipelines, it's easier to learn on the, workflow or on the producing side. So it's easier to take advantage of different strategies. I know there are studios now who are having, different locations. They're having a facility or having partnership because, again, they can take care of tax incentives. Obviously, it's not the ideal format. It still needs some improvement. Obviously, it doesn't work for all type of companies because, for example, Framestore is doing incredibly well and they're one of the biggest studios in the world, or Weta. So their strategy is different. But for this type of size where I have more knowledge, having in mind where we are at, this kind of structure, I think, works better. Obviously, when the industry is down and there are difficulties, you will still feel the bumps, but maybe this will help to have like a soft fall and make things easier to pass along.
And I mean, and on a small scale, because we always talk about studios and artists at the same time, basically on a small scale, I highly recommend everyone who joins my Python cohorts, for example, to connect with people and connect and collaborate with each other. Because again, everyone who's potentially in a company can bring you along. Hey, you need another comper, let's bring Wiz or whoever, and you need a supervisor, let's bring Alan, basically. And so I think that is also on a small scale possible, that when you create this mini collaborations where, you become good friends with someone, you don't have to be just professional friends even. And then you just, bring good people that you like to work with you into a new opportunities versus them trying to figure out where's my next job, and then basically, Alan, you bring me in, I bring you in the next gig in, recommend you, try to push you to get in, and then basically create like a little bit of a network of people just moving along in a more safer. Exactly. And again, it's not optimal, but it's the best to some degree we can do, especially on the individual side, And
also it can work because, the people you're trying to partner with, whether it's friendship or as an artist or trying to establish teams, or, you're just a couple of freelancers trying to do something together, or smaller studios. This can work because you or someone within the group have vetted the new member. So, there's someone who, at least to some degree will fit in. That's one thing. That's one thing to have in mind. The second thing I think we need to have in mind for the future of the industry is, and regarding this to the competition between bidding at studios and doing stories and making things work and having stability. Obviously, each studio has its own ups and downs in terms of what they're good at, or maybe the sales is better at one department, or maybe the supervising, or maybe the production is better at the other studio, or maybe they don't excel at something, but as an average they're doing really good work, but not they're top of their field. But it's good, I think, to have in mind that the field has been quite leveled. The playing field has been quite leveled in the past years. If you have a 50 people company, for example, or 100, and 20 of your best people then leave to another company, then okay, what happened with the initial company? In terms of talent, they were good at FX, let's say, or simulations, and then they went to the other company. Then the other company can start to move into a different niche because they have those talents, but they need to keep that talent. While the initial company lost that talent, and maybe if they cannot replace it, they'll have to adapt to a different kind of resources. So what I'm trying to say is we're kind of getting to some sort of leveling between companies. And the question we have to address ourselves, as artists and companies and within the clients, is what do we actually bring to the table in terms of why should client X work with me and not with, 3 other companies which are competing, setting the price aside, because now obviously the price is a highly competitive factor, especially with the tax incentive from different countries and region. But leaving that aside, why would they want to work with one studio or the other? And this is, I think, always comes up to, producers and supervisors and clients who want to work with people who they enjoy working. Stepping everything aside, you always want to have on your end someone who, can have your back. And someone you can enjoy working. And even if you're having difficult situations, whether it's feedback or financial, or the budget is too small and you still want to, do some nice things, you need someone to whom you can have a dialogue and see that you can make things go through. And at the end of the day, you're still having a good relationship with those person. We actually pulled it out and it worked great without, stepping over dead bodies. So I think this kind of complements the entire collaboration part and adds up more to the human relationship of it. Because even if we read and we talk about, VFX industry and entertainment industry and the film industry, it's actually, a lot of people trying to tell stories. And the way we work and the way we manage this kind of relationship can affect a lot of the things happening. Just like, the silent voice mentioned with regarding the layoff from MPC, he was lucky enough to have a heads up for his dismissal. So that's another way of people having your back to some degree,
Yeah, I think that was a fantastic kind of summary. I would like to wrap this up a little bit. One of the things that I wanted to address, since we talked about negotiation, I highly recommend you to read this book if you are interested in learning how to negotiate better in the future. Never Split the Difference is by Chris Voss, who is an FBI hostage negotiator. So he basically mentioned every negotiation is a hostage negotiation where someone doesn't want to give up the hostage, which means in this case money, overtime, whatever. Honestly, it's the best book I've ever read on negotiation. If you even apply, 1 or 2 points from this thing, you will have more success in every negotiation. I don't mean only contract, also with your lead, with your artist, whatever. It's all about all situations in our job is about team, about money, about everything. We always have to do it. This is a fantastic book. I just highly recommend it. If you have the need for yourself, also I do contract negotiation. It's currently discounted also, so feel free to find it on my website, alexanderrichter.td.com/negotiation. I just posted also in the chat. If you feel like you need someone to talk to, negotiate with me, find better strategies. Feel free about that. That's also something good. But again, at the end of the day, I think this book is definitely, if you are a disaster in negotiation, and in my experience, most people are absolutely horrible in negotiation. Even if you don't think you are horrible, try to negotiate with someone who has a little bit of confidence. They will mop the floor. It doesn't matter. Like a lot of things, there's two things. Someone either has good negotiation skills or someone has confidence. At the end of the day, if you have one of these two things, you become a good negotiator. One of the ways that I remember I negotiated the 1-year contract with my employer like a few years ago is I didn't know that this was not normal what I was asking. For me, it was normal. So I had confidence when I was asking for the 1-year contract, but it was not normal for the company or the industry to have a 1-year contract. So for me, like I was a good negotiator in this moment because I didn't know that I should not ask so much. You know, great way to negotiate. You are disillusional, basically. If you're disillusional, you will ask for things and you believe them, and the other part has to try to convince you that you are wrong, and it's really hard, actually. So again, negotiation is about finding not the middle ground, never split the difference. It's about finding win-win. Because everything else is a disaster, because you don't want to work if someone underpaid you for them again. You don't want to work if you find out later that they underpaid you. They don't want to work if they destroy your enjoyment of that. Well, again, there's a lot of things. And so negotiation is never about like you win and the other person loses, because it destroys every future negotiation and every future work with this person or with the studio. And the studio, same thing. If they treat you unfairly and you find out that they underpay you to everyone else in the studio, you never come back. You know, so it is. So negotiation is about finding a way where you win and you get what you need, and the studio or whoever you negotiate win and they get what they need. And often that is actually possible. It just needs to be figured out. You know, basically. Okay, and then a few comments at the end. Diverse skills, it is often a good thing at the moment, because sometimes we have to switch positions, we have to switch environments. I think it's not bad to know more than just one thing. Again, I'm a big fan of technical skills. So the other thing to whatever you do could be something like Python. So I always recommend, you don't have to become a Python programmer, you don't have to become a Python expert, but if you are a modeler who knows a little bit Python to help yourself, if you are an animator who knows a little bit Python to help yourself, I think it just makes you more technical, more reliable, more automation, and so on and so forth. I just believe this stabilizes your position a little bit stronger than anyone else in the team, basically. And again, what we mentioned before, besides negotiation, is I would recommend at the moment, especially, figure ways out that what you do, can you monetize it elsewhere? You do coaching, you sell your assets, you sell whatever, you know, you make a small mini business out of it, you make a course, whatever. Find out what you're really good at and find out if there is a demand for something else that you do, basically. And make a side business out of it. Maybe it's your main business, but at least you have something when there is not a good industry, when there is not that many gigs. And if you combine that with a better negotiation by having better contracts, a little bit more money and whatever, and you have maybe an extra income without working 80 hours a week, that's not what I'm talking here, then I think that can stabilize it a little bit. But as long as the industry, as unhealthy as it is at the moment, I think there is no way about having better contracts and maybe creating an alternative for you, basically. Just a quick side note also, as I mentioned, I'm doing Python courses. If you're interested to learn Python, you can find, we just start, tomorrow will be our cohort starting. You can join until Friday if you still want to join our Python courses. We have Python for Maya, Python for 3ds Max, Python for Houdini, Python for Nuke, Python Copilot, Python Advanced, and soon Python Pipeline. So if you want to join, here's some 10% discount code, TD Meetup Future. You can just type it during checkout and you get 10%. And happy to have you. I think most people are here already familiar with me. Some people already joined my courses. So if it's not for you, you already know what you know. But for everyone who is still interested in Python and want to diversify and want to add certain skills, I highly recommend this. And again, I'm also doing coachings like job interview, job application and negotiation coaching. Because at the end of the day, for me, it's important to bring people into jobs And one of the reasons I'm fighting so hard for becoming more TDs in the world, because I believe it's a stable job, it's a strong job, it has the best security, and it has the highest payment. I personally had never, I obviously, like everyone, in the beginning, I had also problems finding jobs and stuff. But in my career, for example, I generally never got fired from a job. I never get let off or whatever. I just always decided, hey, this is not a good job. Hey, this is a good opportunity. And then I left my current job and went to somewhere else, and then ended up at Weta. And I don't think, for me, I think my path would be much longer if I would have been an artist. I think as a technical director, for me, it was easier to go into big companies and to get into better positions because technical people are more in demand, basically, and just stronger positions. So that's what I see, basically. Okay, any final comments, questions that you guys want to add to this conversation? I think I saw some chat messages. Let me quickly read that. Ms. Wadjet, hi. While joining visual effects back in 2015, I was aware that VFX is always a dynamic field. So I got into Match Move so that I can go to exploring further in the 3D pipeline. I was a lead before COVID, and due to COVID, I lost my job. So fortunately, I was learning 3D modeling and Houdini. So I got a job as a generalist. And still after a few years, I got fired because of writer's strike. I come from an engineering background, so I got into pipeline development, and again, we got fired. I have no clue what to do. Yeah, this is exactly where we want to figure out the way that's one of the talks about it. But again, I think the background, so I got into pipeline development. Okay, yeah, so you already were in pipeline development. But again, it's always a little bit about finding the right company, diversifying also a little bit your income if possible. And there's certain roles I feel like are super hard to maintain. I personally, if I see a compositing resume, I'm always shocked because a lot of these is like 2 months, 3 months, 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, 3 months. For me, this would be like super stressful. So big respect to every compositor who goes through that all the time. I think that is super hard for me. So that would be not a good job for me. Even if I want to do compositing, I would probably become a compositing TD or something, because you can start in the beginning and you will let go, maybe never, like, because you will continue to the next project, or you will go at the end of the project. So you will be there for 6, 8, 12 months, basically, at least. And I think that is definitely something. Are there other examples of technical skills? I mean, technical skills, Python is just one of the technical skills. What is Python? Python is a problem solver. What is the problem? You have a big process and you want to simplify it with one button. That's what the problem is. So what is a technical skill is basically become a problem solver. Typical things. Software is slow. Takes 2 hours to open a Maya shot, Houdini shot, whatever. You are the person who figures out what is the issue, fixes it, and the shot opens in 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. That is the thing. So you are the one people call when something is not working. Someone presses on a button doesn't work. Let's call Alex. Let's call Thomas. You open the shot, it takes 15 minutes. You open Maya crashes instantly. Let's call Thomas to figure out why. That is the technical skills. The most important technical skill is how to solve problem. If you are someone who breaks problems down, okay, why is Maya taking so long? Let me look at the assets in the scene. Oh, this asset has a high vertex count. Maybe if I reduce it, okay, let me reduce it, re-import it, let's open again, works, doesn't work, next try. So it's basically breaking down a problem into mini solutions and then figuring out what you can do to do that. That is the most important skill, technical skill that you can have. You solve problems for the artist, so the artist can focus on the art, like making good stuff. That's the most important thing. And then an essential part of technical skills is Python, because Python allows you to summarize steps, to create solutions with one button, to create innovative ways of doing things. An highlight that always is directly seen in the camera, for example, and so on and so forth. Custom shader and so on. So I think that is the idea basically behind the technical skills at the end of the day here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. That was our VFX Future talk with Alan and me. The idea was basically, to give you a little bit of a view over the industry, but also look at different aspects of it. And again, just see it as a two-way street. First, there's things we need to do in the studio, and every one of us is a part of a studio. So every one of us can push for certain changes. Obviously, some of us are not producers, so maybe we cannot talk about the budget, but we can talk about other things that we don't like. And then the second part is we have to push for certain elements as artists, which means better negotiation. So we should learn negotiation. We should start to negotiate more to get better contracts. We should maybe not accept bad contracts in general. I understand there is desperation sometimes. I understand that sometimes situations are hard. First thing, you can always negotiate. It doesn't matter how much you need this job. You can always ask for a certain guarantee, more payment, whatever. You can always ask. You just need to learn how to ask without create, because it basically never happens that if you ask, people say, no, go away. Just never happens, basically. So that is the thing. That was the idea, is basically to look at the industry, to look at the problems of the industry, and to look at possible solutions from the studio point of view and us. Because it's not only the studio that creates the situation, it's also us that allow certain aspects. It doesn't always make everything perfect, but I think it's this mixture of the situation. And the rest is, I think the rest we need to figure out a better system. And I think at the end of the day, it comes up to the future studios that are founded, that have a better system, that maybe rely less on big studios like Disney and Warner Brothers, who are not willing to make a model that works. And they just work with smaller production studios, a small studio in Germany, a channel or whatever. And they just stay with studios that they get paid. They know exactly what they get. Yes, it's not as big and exciting or whatever, but at least you have a business that stays in business, because you work with studios and companies that want to work with you on future projects that have fair payment, that are controlled by a government that wants you to survive, basically. And I think that is the idea of this talk. It's still, again, it's very hard to, create a healthy industry if we are not in full control, but there is a certain things that we can do. And I highly recommend, again, independent of what you do, I highly recommend is to see this industry. If it doesn't work for you, then maybe it's time to, shift a little bit. If you have software skills, maybe you should look out for that instead of just don't be excited about it. But if you like what you do, if you enjoy your work as a visual effects, I believe a little bit more technical knowledge will help, a little bit more negotiation skills and, pushing for what you need will help. And just kind of a little bit more of diversification of your income would help, just because, again, most of you produce something. Most of you do something. I'm 100% sure you produce models, you produce textures, you produce shaders, you produce comps. So why not use this as put it on an online platform for stock photos or models that they can download in the Unity store or whatever. So that is the idea. Again, not optimal, far from it. But it's better to use this as an opportunity versus just rely on, hopefully, there is a studio who's underpaid that will hire you also underpaid. And that is something we want to avoid that. So again, I'm a big fan of becoming a TA, TD, but I'm also a big fan of people finding good ways to survive versus just trust that the next contract will be better, basically. It's and some of it you can push for and you will get it. And some of it is if you have a little bit of an extra income, you do some teaching or you sell some products or whatever, suddenly you don't rely too much on the next contract that is maybe takes a while to come, stuff like that. So I think that is the way that we see this. And at the same time, again, we hope that this helps you to see this industry as not only as a dumpster fire, as the thumbnail kind of suggests, but also as something that is broken. That is broken for at least for 40 years. Again, ILM 1990 had already problems of that, which I can highly recommend to read the book Upstart. It's really good. To see about the industry's situation. But there is also demand. People want. There's billion-dollar industry. People want to watch avatars and Star Warses and whatever. It's not like it doesn't make money. It just doesn't make money to the people that actually work on it. And I think one thing that Alan mentioned before that I also believe is something we need to do is studios has to get a revenue share of the income of the movies and the games. And I think if this happens, then for a studio, it's okay to make minus on a visual effects project if they know they get like 5% from the income of the movie. And then it's like, okay, we take a hit, but we want 5% of the movie or 10% of the movie income. So best case, we make millions. Worst case, we take a hit. But it's investment. It's not we take a hit. We overpay. Basically, we take 1 million minus on this project, and then hope that the next project will balance it out, which it will not, because the next project will take 500 minus. So this is like a big kind of gamble that things are. And I think because visual effects studios are so much important part of the movie itself, like again, Electric State is a visual effects project. It's pure visual effects. I think it has to be that visual effects studios have a revenue share at the end of the day. And if maybe that can go down to the artists as well, even better, bonuses and whatever. Hey, was great. Project was great. We get 10% from the movie, and every artist gets part of this 10% as well. So you are motivated to do a great job. You're motivated to stay in the company, and you're motivated to do a great job in the next project, because you see the money comes down and you have a safe job, basically. So that is something we want to push. And again, we wanted this event to be as positive as possible, independent of what dumpster fire is going on. But at the same time, we want to be realistic, because it is a broken system, and we need to A, make it less broken, and B, accept that it's broken, and just be smart and not be lemmings in this industry and just fall into under each cliff that the industry goes through, which in the last 5 years was at least free. It's which is unacceptable, basically. And so again, just make sure that whatever you do, it's what you enjoy. And I mean that also about the work conditions. And if it's not what you enjoy, I would recommend just to shift, especially if you are in any technical position like software development or programming, whatever. There's jobs out there that are much safer and so on. And maybe you enjoy that even more. But if you enjoy it, I think the only way is to find your way through it and not be too 100% reliant on your next paycheck, which nowadays is just, I would say, to some degree, too unsafe in a lot of studios for now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for Alan for doing this with me. Hopefully you got a little bit of a, positive vibe from this, even though, we need to talk about it as realistic as possible. And hopefully you enjoyed this TD meetup. Feel free to sign up for our newsletter. If you want to get notification for future TD meetups, it's alexanderrichtertd.com/newsletter. Let me just add that to that, and then you can basically get a notification. We do this every month. What we want to do in June, we're preparing this. In June, we will talk about financial smart artists. Kind of a addition to this one, because one of the problems that I personally see is a lot of people live too much paycheck to paycheck, and they kind of create a system that is not working. Which means you're basically always in debt a little bit in some kind of way, or you are 3 months away from bankruptcy and stuff like that. And obviously some of it is difficult to manage, but some of it is about understanding what you can do to be more financially independent, what you can do to balance your finances and so on. And we just want to talk about what are the ways that you can make sure that your money is working better for you, that you maybe don't go into debt too easily, and so on and so forth. Some of it will be obvious for a lot of people, like, oh, this is clearly, yeah, of course. But some of it maybe not. So the idea is we want to have a conversation where we talk about how can you be smarter as a visual effects. Generally, we will mix it up between just be financially smart as a person, and then we will talk about the challenges of visual effects and how can we balance that out better. Like typical challenges is we have extremely short contracts, and especially like compositing or something. So Is there a way to balance this out and whatever? So this kind of the things that we want to talk at, that will be in the next, in June probably. So yeah, so if you're interested, sign up for that. You can find this here in the newsletter, and then you get a notification when we have a new event. And if you are interested to learn Python and you want to push that, and you can take the 10% discount by using the TD Meetup Future. Just use this discount code during checkout, and then you get 10%. Can help you to join easier that one. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and I will see you in our next TD Meetup.
I welcome you to join us live and also watch the previous episodes, and I'll see you on our next TD Meetup.